Welcome to This Explainer. As an entrepreneur and executive spending my days right at the intersection of technology and biology, I'm constantly analyzing what actually drives true industry transformation, not just the hype, right? Well, today we are exploring a massive paradigm shift based on the research piece, The Computable Molecule. We're going to break down exactly why artificial intelligence in life sciences isn't merely just another piece of software. It is a structural force. It's literally relocating where value is created and, crucially, who gets to capture it.
Because look, there is a vital strategic difference between a tool and a force. A tool? Well, it simply speeds up an existing process. It lets you do the exact same thing just a little bit faster. But a force permanently changes the entire structure of the industry. Think about it. For the last 40 years, three massive costs acted as basically impenetrable moats for incumbents. The sheer cost of drug discovery, the cost of remaining an independent company, and the astronomical cost of reaching the patient. But here's the reality. AI is systematically draining every single one of those moats.
So here is our roadmap for the boardroom today. First, we'll define this force reordering the industry. Then we'll dive into computable discovery and capital efficiency, followed by a strict clinical reality check. After that, we're going to examine direct distribution and new moats, tackle the imminent patent cliff, and finally, look at how securing this new infrastructure is basically a national priority.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the force reordering life sciences.
To really grasp where we're headed, we first have to understand how value is shared over the last 4 decades. Historically, this division of labor was incredibly predictable. The biotech was the lab, they discovered the science. But big pharma? They were the factory, the massive sales force, and the ultimate distribution channel. Since biotechs just didn't have the balance sheet for late-stage trials or a global sales team, they were basically forced to hand over their assets or just sell themselves entirely to the incumbents. Pharma held all the leverage, so naturally, they captured the lion's share of the value. But as we're going to see, that leverage is completely shifting toward the innovator.
Which brings us to Section 2, computable discovery and capital efficiency.
We all know that traditional economics of drug discovery are just notoriously brutal. We're talking well over $1 billion and a decade of work, with the vast majority of that capital completely wasted on molecules that ultimately fail. But I want you to consider this staggering figure, 80 to 90%. That is the rate at which drug candidates designed with new AI methods are successfully clearing Phase 1 safety trials, 80 to 90%. Compare that to the historical industry average, which sat way down around 50%. This isn't just an incremental step, it's a dramatic structural improvement in capital efficiency. Now, AI hasn't necessarily made drug development easy, but it has absolutely made it far more tractable, highly capital efficient, and mathematically predictable.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, before a single physical molecule is ever synthesized in a wet lab, AI models trained on just oceans of biological data can now accurately predict toxicity, binding affinity, and overall developability. The incredibly slow, expensive physical trial and error is moving in silico, where iterating is practically free. Because of this shift, discovery to clinic timelines are absolutely collapsing. What used to take 4 to 5 grueling years is now being compressed, in the strongest cases, down to under 18 months. Think about that. The financial leverage is shifting entirely.
But let's pause for Section 3, the clinical reality check.
Because as executives and investors, we absolutely need to stay grounded here. Yes, discovery is rapidly industrializing, but human trials, they remain stubbornly analog. In vivo veritas, only in the living body is the truth actually revealed. So the absolutely crucial point we have to remember is this. Phase 1 trials just tell you a molecule is safe. They do not tell you if the molecule actually works. Those amazing 80 to 90% success rates we were just talking about, that's measuring safety. But safety was never where most of these drug candidates died anyway. The truly expensive fatal failures, those happen in phases 2 and 3, where a drug actually has to prove meaningful clinical benefit in large, randomized human studies.
So here's the harsh reality of the situation. AI de-risks inexpensive failures, not the expensive ones. It's fantastic at killing weak molecules early inside the computer way before they can consume your capital. But the human body is the final unforgiving validator. And frankly, it could not care less about the mathematical elegance of your AI model. As capital partners, we literally must heavily discount these early-stage figures until true undeniable efficacy data is proven in the clinic. And because of this new dynamic, the whole financing structure has completely bifurcated. It's like 2 different worlds now. Early-stage capital has actually grown incredibly scarce and demanding. It's only released in strict milestone-based tranches as risk is actively retired. Meanwhile, late-stage capital is concentrating heavily on assets that have already cleared those meaningful clinical hurdles. The market is more than happy to pay a massive premium valuation in late-stage rounds right now simply because the biological progress is mathematically verified and vastly less speculative.
And this brings us to the true new competitive moat. Let's be clear, the AI model itself is not the moat. Predictive capabilities are rapidly becoming available to everyone. Instead, value creation has shifted entirely to proprietary data. It creates this incredible biotechnology data flywheel. Here's how it works. You use proprietary real-world experimental data to create an effective product. Then, you take the massive amounts of data generated from that product to train an even better model for your next one. That compounding proprietary data, that's the real advantage.
Moving on to Section 4, direct distribution and new moats.
So, if the biotech innovator now owns all that precious discovery data, what happens to the massive pharmaceutical sales force? You know, the thing that used to be the ultimate impenetrable distribution moat? Well, it's being completely bypassed. Get this, by 2025, roughly 90% of leading pharma companies were either planning or already running direct-to-patient programs. We're already seeing over 25% of new metabolic drugs sold straight to consumers. For self-administered therapies, think metabolic disease, dermatology, or migraine treatments, a digital delivery model isn't just a concept, it's incredibly viable today. It overcomes payer friction, it drastically lifts patient adherence, and most importantly, it hands the patient relationship and all that glorious data right back to the innovator. The power dynamic hasn't just shifted, it has been permanently altered.
Now let's look at the catalyst forcing everyone's hand in Section 5, the imminent patent cliff.
This, right here, is the macro catalyst driving immediate action across the entire board. Legacy pharmaceutical pipelines are facing a literal existential crisis. By 2030, between $200 billion and $300 billion worth of patented and branded pharmaceuticals are going to lose exclusivity. I want you to just let that number sink in for a second. We are talking about roughly 60% to 65% of the largest pharmaceuticals currently sold losing their patent protection. And the internal pipelines at these massive legacy companies, they simply cannot replace that revenue fast enough. If they don't go out and aggressively acquire new intellectual property, their revenues and their valuations are going to plummet.
And naturally, this looming crisis is fueling an absolute M&A boom. Industry M&A exceeded $100 billion in 2025 alone, and there is roughly $1 trillion in dry powder currently chasing independent biotechs. And here's the kicker. Because AI has fundamentally reduced the capital required to actually reach patients, these independent biotechs can afford to remain independent for a lot longer. They hold the leverage now. They aren't forced to just sell out early to survive anymore. So when they do decide to sell, they can command significantly higher, massive premium valuations from these desperate incumbents.
Finally, let's zoom out for Section 6, Securing the New Infrastructure.
We really need to expand our lens to the macroeconomic level here because this isn't just about healthcare anymore. It is about high-stakes national strategy. The capacity to design and manufacture medicines is now being viewed as a critical national security asset, sitting right there in the exact same category as advanced semiconductors and energy grids. The AI that compresses drug discovery is fundamentally dual use by nature. A country that cannot discover and produce its own therapeutics is highly vulnerable. Because of this, we're seeing intense geopolitical and policy pressure right now to reshore biomanufacturing. Domestic AI-native discovery platforms are perfectly positioned to be the ultimate beneficiaries of this massive reorganization of global supply chains.
So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought. Is your portfolio actually positioned for a life sciences architecture where proprietary data and direct distribution are literally the only remaining moats? The molecule has become computable. The fundamental architecture of value creation in life sciences has permanently changed. The executives and investors who understand this reordering earliest and strategically back the companies with that proprietary data and those direct distribution moats, well, they are going to be the ones defining the entire next generation of this industry. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.